Good evening. This is the 6th of February, 2024. I'm shooting in the back of our pickup camper. This is an old 1991 S&S camper built in Montana, sitting in the bed of our ancient Chevrolet pickup truck, a C20 diesel, 3/4 ton with a little bit of boosting. We've got a lot of miles on both this camper and this pickup truck. And I go under the handle Graybird. And very quickly, there's a long story behind that. Many years ago, in another lifetime, when I lived in central Idaho, we bought our first airplane, a little Cessna 152, and it was a very pretty little plane, blue fuselage with white wings. And at that time, everybody was big into CB radio, and we were in an isolated mountain valley, and of course I had to have a CB radio, one in the shop and one in the pickup, and then I put a small set in the airplane and installed a little whip antenna right behind the canopy on the back of the fuselage, and it worked out extremely well. So I would take off and fly around the valley and have the CB radio on, and everybody in those days had handles. So I thought Bluebird would be a wonderful handle, and it was, and it stuck. So every time I was in the air and had the little CB radio turned on and patched in through my headset, I would say, this is Bluebird. Anybody got their ears on? Well, as all things do, that eventually came to an end, and the years went by. And the internet became a big thing. And again, I felt that I needed a handle. And I thought, well, Bluebird doesn't fit anymore. And you can see what's happened here. So I simply changed Bluebird to Graybird and gave it a slightly different spelling so that it applied both as a bird and beard, B-Y-R-D. And that's been my email address and my internet label ever since. So these are being posted under Gray, which has kind of become my nickname, and Graybird. Okay. I'm going to tell a story from those days. Back in those days when I was much younger, we were very heavily into snowmobiling. And in that high mountain country, that valley, the airfield was at a mile high, 5,200 feet. The little community was a few dozen feet higher. Willow Creek Summit, which we had to fly in and out of or drive over in order to get to anything south outside of the valley, was Willow Creek Summit. It was at 7,200 feet. And so I had to be flying at least 7,500 feet, preferably more than that, whenever I flew the little airplane out. And due to the rugged nature of the central Idaho Salmon River Mountains and the White Clouds and the Sawtooths and the Lost River Range and all of those various mountain ranges and their associated foothills stepping down into the valley, we found that in the wintertime we could cover far more country and go far faster on snowmobiles over the old roads and Jeep roads that were now snow-covered than we ever could in the summertime with our pickups and Jeeps and cars. So this one winter day, probably in January, it was the dead of winter, some friends and I decided to go snowmobiling up in the Willow Creek, or the Willow, up over the summit and the foothills. There's a beautiful snowmobile area up in there. So we set off, and of course, being wintertime, dark fell quite early. So it was a pitch black evening, even though it wasn't that late, probably about 8 o'clock. By the time we got the machines off the trailers and pickups and loaded and ready to go. So we headed out up into the foothills, up over this would have been the west side of the summit, on the west of Old Highway 93 alternate. And it was one of those super cold evenings where the snow is so powdery and fluffy, it just sparkles and goes kicking out sideways in a big spray of diamonds. And the night sky was perfectly black with a myriad of stars. In that central Idaho country, the air is so clear that you could see the entire universe, the Milky Way, all of the constellations overhead. Just a magnificent, magnificent sight. And the air itself was so crisp, it seemed to sparkle. So, needless to say, we had a wonderful time. And we're running 35, 40, 45 miles an hour, cutting big circles and going further up into the slopes and more towards the west and the southwest, following the line of the ridge that unfolded before us. And then we stopped and we had coffee from our thermoses and shot the bull for a while in a circle of snowmobiles. And then somebody said, well, you know, we think we should be getting back. It's starting to get pretty late, and it was. It was getting towards 10, 11 o'clock in the evening. Time to load up and go home. And I pretty much had a good idea which way we had to go, so I started to turn in that direction, which I knew was northerly, in order to get back down, and then easterly. And the other fellow started to turn the other way to go south, and I yelled at him, "You're going the wrong way. You're going south. You're going to drop down into the towards the Little Lost River Valley, and you'll be miles out of your way." Now, these days, truth doesn't seem to matter, and I'm going to express just a little bit of a rant. Everybody seems entitled to their own facts, and everybody seems to willfully create their own version of the truth. And this is very sad, because it means it becomes very difficult to reason with people, to have a reasonable conversation, and to try to consult together to arrive at the truth, to arrive at a consensus, and to make intelligent decisions, safe decisions. So, this evening, I was met by stiff opposition. Everybody disagreed with me. No, we're not going the right direction. This is the way we have to go. And I said, but you're going south. We need to go north. We need to go north and east. And they said, no, we're going north. I said, no, you're not. And they said, well, how do you know? Do you have a compass? And I said, no, I don't, but I know which way is north. And they said, how do you know that? I said, look up in the sky. Simply look overhead at those beautiful stars and look up there. And I'm amazed that you fellows don't know this. Look up at the Big Dipper and line those two stars up on the outside edge of its cup and draw an imaginary line using those two stars. Extend that line and you'll come right to the tail of the Little Dipper that you'll see up there. They're both very clear. They're directly overhead. And I said, if you'll notice that bright star at the end of the tail of the Little Dipper is the North Star. That's Polaris. And it always stays overhead the North Pole. It's an old navigational guide for finding true north and for finding your way. And they grumbled and started to argue with me a bit, and I said, no, if you will remember, I'm sure you've heard of it, and that is the North Star, and that means if we turn to the right and we start heading towards that North Star, we will soon come to the trail that we had followed, and we'll be going in the right direction, and we'll go back to our pickups, back to our rigs. Well, needless to say, everybody settled down after more grumbling. And we fired up the machines and we took off, and sure enough, we came to the trail. We cut the tracks that we had made that led us down off the foothills, down off the mountain, and down to our pickups, and we loaded up. And that was the end of it. Nobody really wanted to admit that they were wrong. Nobody wanted to admit that they would have gone the wrong way, so I, for once in my life, kept my mouth shut. But I never forgot it. In this case, a little ignorance could have been very disastrous, because if we had gone down into the head of the Little Lost River Valley on the other side of Willow Creek Summit, it would have been bad. We might have run out of gas, we'd have been stranded, there was no traffic on the road to speak of on that little highway that comes up over Willow Creek, and there we would have been. So, facts and fact-based truth are pretty handy to know. That's a true story. I hope I haven't bored you. I haven't stumbled too much. Well, thanks for watching. Bye.